What up, AOK Mafia? It's your boy Artofkickz, and just like that, we back with another one. 5 disturbingly shocking discoveries on Google Maps, Earth, and Street View. Ooh. This should be good. This should be interesting. I'm not about to go on there and look in these Google Earths and maps and all this type of stuff to find weird stuff. I ain't got time for that. But shout out to the people that do. Shout out to the people that do and create videos like this for us. I will have the link to this channel down in the description box below. Y'all ready for this?
The world is a vast and beautiful place.
Yes, it is.
And most people are not fortunate enough to be able to explore it.
That's true, me.
But thanks to Google Maps and Street View, you can now conduct your own virtual world tour for free.
Yeah, it's not the same, but
and
okay.
View and explore over 65 countries.
I don't understand how they did that.
Spanning 7 continents, all from the comfort of your own home. However, every now and then, something turns up that is truly shocking or creepy for the viewer.
Tell me about it.
And here we look at 5 occasions when Google Maps or Street View has thrown up something completely unexpected.
Really?
Be that the truck of a serial killer that had yet to be found when the street was photographed, or even the eerie building that was transmitting the mysterious Russian number station. This video is brought to you by Amino Apps, my go-to for catching up on the latest ghost photo or story on their paranormal community, where you can engage with each and every post and offer your thoughts on some of the creepy posts over there. I held a
that sounds interesting for real.
Q&A over on the paranormal page a few weeks back, so go check out my answers by clicking the link in the description or pinned YouTube comment to download Amino for free on iOS or Android. Once you're on Amino, search Paranormal to join and you will see the Q&A and all the awesome paranormal posts. Thank you again for Amino for sponsoring this video, and now it's time to hit those lights, sit back.
Never heard of them. Shout out to them. Top 5.
The Village of Dead Dolls. If you look on Google Maps for a tiny village called Nagoro, located in the valleys of Shikoku, Japan, you'll get a shock, because as you follow the road through the village, all is not what it seems. As you may have noticed, the village is populated not by people, but dolls. They are all the work of Mrs. Ayano, who returned to her childhood village after many years away, and discovered that most of the residents that she formerly knew had either died or left.
Oh, wow.
Feeling lonely, she first made a doll that resembled her deceased father. This was followed by recreations of other members of her family, which progressed to former residents of the village, all in the form of life-size dolls.
Wow.
There are around 350 dolls scattered around the village today,
She made that many.
each representing a dead or former resident. Even the school has a few dolls sat at desks, waiting for classes to begin. Ayano has strategically placed the dolls of the people she once knew in the places she remembers they worked or frequented. According to the story, it's claimed by locals that new dolls appear overnight, although no one has ever seen Ayano putting them in their positions. And an even creepier tale is that she creates dolls of people who are still alive in preparation for when they die.
Oh, heck, nah. Woman, you better not make a doll of me if I go there. Well, that's interesting, though. She returned back to her old town, her neighborhood where she grew up as a kid, to live there, thinking that, you know, people that she knew were still going to be there. But she gets there, discovered, like, she's going to be there by herself pretty much for the most part. And they said that those dolls pop up. Nobody ever see her place them dolls in the locations. Ooh, creepy.
Ariel Castros' home. 2207 Seymour Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, probably doesn't mean much to most of you. And if you search on Google Maps, it's represented by an ominous blur. But behind the blur lies the home of former bus driver and father of 4, Ariel Castro, who held 3 girls captive for over 10 years and subjected them to an unimaginable and inhumane existence inside the property during the time this Google Street View was taken. The horror started in August 2002 when 21-year-old Michelle Knight accepted a lift from a man she vaguely recognized as the father of a girl she knew. It was a decision she would regret for the next 11 years. Michelle was taken to Castro's home in Seymour Avenue, where she was tied up and left in an upstairs room, where she remained for the next 11 years, often chained to a wall and regularly abused, beaten and raped by Castro. During her time in captivity, she suffered 5 miscarriages. Less than a year after Michelle's kidnap, on April the 21st, 2003, Castro picked up another girl. She was 16-year-old Amanda Berry, who accepted a lift from Castro after she had finished her shift at Burger King. Initially, her disappearance was treated as a runaway, until a week later, an unidentified male used her cell phone to call her mother, saying, "I have Amanda, she's fine, and will be coming home in a couple of days." Sadly, Amanda's mother died in 2006 of a heart failure and never saw her daughter again. Castro's third and youngest victim was 14-year-old Georgina de Jesus. He picked her up on April 2nd, 2004, as she walked home from school. Georgina knew him, as she was friends with his daughter. During her time at Castro's house, Georgina was chained to Michelle, and the pair were held on the top floor. Amanda lived separately in another room, and on Christmas Day 2006, she gave birth to Castro's daughter. Michelle was ordered to help with the birth, and Castro threatened to kill her if the baby didn't survive. Despite an initial scare, where the baby stopped breathing, Michelle was able to revive it, and it lived.
Wow, that's like a freaking movie, man. He's like, he sit there and tell this girl, he's like, help her birth my child, and if my child dies, you die. A scare occurred where the child wasn't breathing. She was able to resuscitate the child. Bro, that's like a movie, man. This is crazy, bro. It's interesting that we say things are like a movie when movies are like real life. You know, too often do we see the most extraordinary or extraordinary things occur in movies, so we think, oh man, that wouldn't happen in real life. So that's why we tend to say or make statements like that's like a movie, or that, you know. Oh man, this is woo.
During the time Castro kept the girls imprisoned, he still held down his job as a school bus driver until he was fired in 2012. He also regularly held family barbecues and nights with friends at the house, when he would move the girls into the basement in case anyone heard them. He also occasionally took his daughter outside and even introduced her as the child he had with his new girlfriend. After 10 long years, it was Amanda that was finally able to make contact with a neighbor after she realized Castro had left the door unlocked. She escaped with his 6-year-old daughter and alerted the authorities, who rescued Michelle and Georgina.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here, I'm free now.
All 4 of them were taken to the hospital and later released. Michelle was the last to be released, as Castro had been particularly cruel to her.
Oh my God. This woman is over. Imagine he's a child was sorry, excuse me. A child was born into that situation and raised in that situation. Ooh, put him all the way under the jail. Put him under the jail. Put him under the jail. Evil.
And she had been beaten so frequently that she had to have her jaw reconstructed.
What? Poor thing.
Because she had endured so much abuse, after she was freed, Michelle legally changed her name to avoid the traumatic memories that she associated with her previous name.
I can't help but to think, so many of us go through so much in our lives that affect us on a daily basis. Especially if it's traumas of our past. But how does someone like this, or like these women that go through these type of ordeals, how do they get past them? How do they cope? How do they deal? How are they able to go through life with a smile on their face? How are they able to gain trust in people and reconnect with people, or connect with people, new people? it takes a strong person. I know that much. And some can't do it.
The full horror of the past 11 years was revealed, and Castro was sentenced to consecutive life terms in prison, plus 1,000 years.
Woo!
Without any
Nobody lives 1,000 years, bro. So congratulations. You're going to be under the jail.
Possibility of parole. But just a month after his conviction, on the evening of September the 3rd, 2013, Castro was found hanged by a bedsheet in his cell.
Put himself under the jail. Look at this man. Wait, hold on. It was only a month after his... Because he knew he wasn't going to get out. He would rather have taken his own life than to be a prisoner in jail for the rest of it. What makes it so bad? He don't look like that bad of a guy, but that's not the truth. That's not the truth.
But just a month after his...
Only a month.
...conviction, on the evening of September the 3rd, 2013, Castro was found hanged by a bedsheet in his cell at the Correctional Reception Center in Ohio. As part of the plea bargain, Castro's house was demolished on August the 7th, 2013, watched by family and friends of the girls. But chillingly, the ominous blur on Google Maps is still a reminder of the horrors those poor girls had to endure there.
Wow.
Israel Keyes' truck. Now this next image, caught on Google Street View in 2011, may look innocent enough. After all, it's just a truck parked on a street. That is until you look at the name on the trailer, Keyes Construction, and realise this truck and trailer belong to Israel Keyes, a notorious serial killer who committed a series of rapes and burglaries in and around Alaska, and who murdered at least 11 people. Keyes was born in Utah in 1978, and although he was brought up in a Mormon family, he showed no interest in religion. And when his family moved to Washington, he became friends with a man who went on to murder 3 people. Keyes later served in the US Army from 1998 through 2011, and it was during this period that his killing spree started in Washington State.
98 to 2011, he was in the Army for 13 years?
Where he killed at least 4 people. After he was discharged from the Army, he did odd jobs for a few years before setting up a construction business in 2007 called Keyes Construction. By this time, he was based in Alaska. Keyes planned his murders, sometimes years in advance, and always killed far away from his home and never in the same area twice. In order to avoid detection, he would go on his murder trips with his phone turned off and paid for everything in cash. He also killed randomly and had no connection to any of his victims. In 2011, Bill and Lorraine Currier of Essex, Vermont, went missing after Keyes broke into their home.
I hate to say it, but sometimes you may look at some of these mass murderers and think that they are very ignorant, very stupid people, but I beg to differ. I beg to differ in this case. In many cases, to be honest with you, this dude was far from dumb. Far from dumb. He was intelligent to some degree. He knew how to kind of conceal what it was that he was doing. He knew to not kill in the same place twice. He knew to turn off his phone when he would go on these little killing sprees or whatever you want to call them. He knew to only use cash and not use debit or credit when he was, on doing these killing sprees. I hate saying that. And he would even plan out some of these killings years in advance. This dude was intelligent to some degree. There's a movie, I think it's called The Following. It was about not movie, it's a TV show. It's a TV show. I think it was about 3 or 4 seasons long. It was a cult leader, and the dude was a serial killer as well. Very intelligent, very intelligent. I'm telling you, some of these people can be really, really smart.
He tied them up before driving to an abandoned farmhouse where he shot Bill before sexually assaulting and strangling Lorraine. However, their bodies have never been found. Keyes was meticulous in his planning of their murders. First, he flew to Chicago and then drove 1,000 miles in a rented car where he...
How does he find these people? Like, how does he choose his victims?
Picked up a murder kit that he had hidden 2 years earlier. The kit contained a handgun and various other supplies. After killing the pair, he moved the kit to a new hiding place in Parrishville, New York, in readiness for his next murder. It remained there until after his arrest. Keyes was finally caught after he kidnapped and murdered 18-year-old Samantha Koenig, a barista working in Anchorage, Alaska. He held Samantha for a day, then murdered her, leaving her body in a shed. He then went off on a cruise. When he returned, he demanded a $30,000 ransom for a safe return, and took a photograph of Samantha's dead body, along with a 4-day-old issue of the Anchorage Daily News.
Is this the same girl? This don't look like the same girl. I feel like we've heard this story before, but it was specifically on the girl, and we saw video footage of it happening. Like she was at work by herself, and he went through the drive-thru. It sounds like the same story. Hold on.
Trying to maintain the illusion that she was still alive, he then dismembered her corpse and disposed of it in the Matanuska Lake, just north of Anchorage.
Wait. The story that I remember, it was very similar to this, but the guy took the girl back to his home, had her in his garage or whatever, and pretty much told her, he was like, hey, I'm gonna kill you. But he did the same thing. He tried to get a ransom. And all this stuff. Then end up the next day went on a trip with his daughter, with his little girl. So this is not the same one, but it has a similar kind of story to it.
Samantha's desperate family paid the ransom, believing she was still alive, but police were able to track Keyes after he used Samantha's debit card at various locations, and he was eventually arrested in Texas and extradited to Alaska.
Wow.
Keyes confessed to a string of offences, including armed robbery, rape, burglaries, arson, and murder, including at least one in New York State.
I wonder why he confessed, because he tried so hard to hide everything that he was doing. Why confess to doing it all?
Authorities have never been able to identify, but he was never convicted because on December the 2nd, 2012, whilst being held at the Anchorage Correctional Complex on suspicion of murder, he committed suicide by cutting his wrists and strangulation. His suicide made him a rarity. He was a confessed serial killer who was never condemned for his crimes.
Confessed serial killer who was never condemned for his crimes. He took his own life. I wonder. I never even thought about this until now. Heck, I could have thought about this with the last guy that hung himself in his cell. But people that are willing to take lives so easily, would they not be so willing to take their own to avoid being held in captivity for the rest of their lives? It seemed like that was the case for him. It was too easy for him to do that. He was used to it. He was used to taking lives. This time he just had to take his own. Viewer discretion is advised.
What is chilling is just what was hiding in his truck.
Yo, there's a person in his truck. You see that? There's a girl or somebody.
Google Maps caught the image. Philip and Nancy Garrido's house. This Street View image, taken in July 2007, looks ordinary enough. Just a house on a suburban street in South Lake Tahoe, California. Slightly neglected, but nothing that stands out. The image also showed the homeowner leaving his house and follow behind the Google vehicle for a while. However, at the time this was taken, in a shed behind the house, a young woman was being held captive. Her name was JC Dugard, and she had been abducted 16 years earlier when she was an 11-year-old walking home from school. The man in the truck is her abductor, convicted sex offender Philip Garrido. Garrido and his wife Nancy snatched JC on June the 10th, 1991, as she walked to catch her school bus. After pulling up beside her in his truck, Garrido rolled down his window and rendered her unconscious with a stun gun. Nancy then bundled her into the car and held her down as she drifted in and out of consciousness. They then drove her for 3 hours to their home in Antioch. Initially, Dugard only had contact with Philip, who would regularly rape her whilst handcuffed in the tiny soundproof shed he held her captive in. But after 7 months, he introduced her to his wife Nancy, who initially showed her some compassion, bringing her milkshakes and soft toys, but who, over the years, turned on JC and became jealous of her. And when Philip was jailed for failing a drug test, she became Dugard's jailer until he returned. Eventually, the Garridos released JC from her handcuffs for short periods, although she was kept locked in the shed with no access to doctors or dentists. And at the age of 13, she was pregnant with her first child. She later gave birth to a daughter on August the 18th, 1994. JC learned about babies and childbirth from watching programs on the tiny TV she was supplied with her. Her second daughter was born on November the 13th, 1997. JC was able to take care of her daughters and protect them from Garrido. After many years living in the shed, Garrido eventually built an 8-foot-tall fence around the backyard and set up a tent for JC and her children, and she was allowed to walk outside. The Garridos agreed that JC was to call Nancy mother, and that she was to teach her daughters that she was their sister rather than their mother. And when JC and her daughters were eventually allowed to come into contact with other people, this is the story they told. JC was also allowed to work as a graphic designer in Garrido's print shop, where she had access to a phone and email, but remarkably, she made no attempt to alert anyone about her childhood abduction. JC and her daughters also had contact with neighbours who never suspected a thing. To the outside world, JC was going by the name of Elisa, but when in 2004, Philip went to a University of California Berkeley police officer with JC's 2 daughters to seek permission to hold a special event on campus as part of his God's Desire program. The event's manager became suspicious, and after discovering Garrido was a sex offender, she arranged another meeting, and again she was concerned about the girl's appearance and behaviour, so arranged for the family to meet with a parole officer. When the family arrived for the meeting, they were...
I remember this right here. This girl. She gave some type of speech at one point.
Separated, and an agitated JC was asked to confirm her identity. She insisted her name was Elisa and defended Garrido. It wasn't until the police arrived and Garrido admitted he had kidnapped and raped her that she identified herself as JC Dugard, the schoolgirl who had been missing for 18 years. The full horror of those 18 years in captivity were revealed, and on April 28, 2011, the Garridos pleaded guilty to kidnapping and rape by force. Philip was
They had her till she was almost 30 years old.
sentenced to 431 years to life imprisonment, and Nancy received 36 years. JC retained custody of her children and was soon reunited with her family. Since her release, JC has written a book about her life in captivity.
Ooh, that infuriates me. Think about it for a second, you guys. Think about this. Imagine if it was your 11-year-old daughter who was kidnapped, forcefully raped, which is usually always the case. She has 2 children by her would-be kidnapper. She's finally freed after 18 years. You're reconnected with your child. And she comes and she has 2 children of her own. But the children are of the man that raped her. As much as you shouldn't look at those kids in a distasteful manner, you can't help but to think you are the seeds of the man that raped my child. You are his kids. But just as much you are my daughter's kids. And it's not their fault. Not by any means at all. They're completely innocent. But it takes a big person to be able to look at them without having this animosity towards them. Wow. It's crazy.
Entitled A Stolen Life.
Exactly.
UVB-76. Now, we've talked about the buzzer on Top 5s before. The mysterious Russian radio signal, also known as UVB-76, that has been broadcasting since the late 1970s, with the earliest known recording in 1982. The signal, which broadcasts on 4625 kHz, has baffled people for years, with many questioning its purpose and the meaning of the messages that can be heard. It mainly emits a short monotone buzz 25 times a minute, all day, every day. However, every few years, the buzz stops and a Russian voice can be heard, reading out a mixture of numbers and names. Initially, the broadcast was thought to be a recording, playing continuously on loop, but this was dismissed, and it was revealed the buzzer noise is manually generated, as often you can hear activity in the background, suggesting it had a base. The question was, where was it? Efforts to locate where this signal was coming from led to a Russian military base on the outskirts of Povaravo, a small town 19 miles north of Moscow. It can clearly be seen on Google Maps. But when the signal changed in October 2010, it was realized that the station had changed locations. The move was followed by a flurry of activity and voice messages, while it established a signal in its new location, and a new call sign was also heard.
This is something else that's very, very fascinating. Here you have this sound that's being emitted from this radio station, radio tower, whatever you want to call it. It's been emitted since the 70s, and here we are in the 2000s, and this sound is still going. This noise is still going. Nobody really knows much about it or its meaning. But who keeps this going for this long? Only for it to be manually created too. All day, every day. And then every now and then the noise stops and the voice comes in. It must be some type of code.
After the station changed location, urban explorers were keen to get into the old base, and now armed with the Google coordinates, two groups travelled to the remote town and managed to bypass the guard dog and infiltrate the abandoned bunker and military buildings, where for over 30 years the buzz had been transmitting from. They found out from a local farmer that a fierce storm in 2010 had forced the military outpost to be evacuated, which explains the change of location. They described the place as quiet and lonely, with a maze of corridors and rooms. They also found a book that contained a log of messages sent by UVB-76, providing physical proof that they were in the right place, along with confirmation that it had been run by the Russian military. But the mystery is far from being solved. The buzz and sporadic voice messages can still be picked up, and legions of listeners tune in via radios and online streams every day, and all attempts to ascertain its new location have so far proved fruitless, as unlike before, it seems that UVB-76 is now emanating from multiple transmitters across Russia. There are lots of theories on what the purpose of the radio station is, with the most popular being that it is the audible version of Russia's Dead Man Switch system, an automatic nuclear weapons control system operated in the Cold War, that can automatically trigger the launch of Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles in the event that a nuclear strike is detected. A device that is not supposed to be still in use, but is rumoured to still be switched on and fully function should the need arise. This seems unlikely, but who knows?
No, that seems highly likely.
The buzz is more likely to be a channel marker used to discourage others from using the same frequency, so the Russian military can communicate through coded messages to multiple units at the same time. But still, no one really knows. Although thanks to Google Maps and a few brave urban explorers, at least we know for sure that it is something to do with the Russian military. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed, and I know some of these were a bit of...
Interesting. Woo! Man, this was 30 minutes. There was a lot to take in. But y'all know what time it is. Like this reaction, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more. As always, the link to the original gonna be down in the description box below. If you haven't already, make sure you follow your boy on the gram and Twitter at Artofkickz. And I'm gonna catch y'all in the next one. See ya.